Good evening, and welcome to Sleep Sanctuary, where calmness and imagination meet to guide you into a restful sleep. Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply allow yourself to settle into the comfort of this moment. Let the world around you fade, and picture yourself surrounded by gentle silence. Tonight, I'll take you on a journey, a story of discovery, warmth, and solace found in the most unexpected place. It began on a night much like this one. The air was sharp, biting, each breath a cloud of frost. Snow blanketed the forest, muffling every sound, leaving only the faint crunch of my boots breaking the stillness. The storm had come suddenly, catching me unprepared, and as the sky darkened, I could feel the cold seeping into my bones. The trees loomed tall and shadowy, their branches heavy with ice, creaking under the weight of the storm. I had lost my way hours ago, the familiar paths buried beneath drifts of snow. Each step forward felt heavier, my thoughts flickering between panic and the faint hope of finding shelter. And then I saw it. A faint glow in the distance, barely visible through the swirling snow. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, a flicker of firelight amidst a world of white. But as I trudged closer, the light grew steadier, more real. It beckoned me, cutting through the cold like a lifeline. The glow came from a small cabin nestled deep in the forest. It stood alone, untouched by time, its wooden walls frosted with snow yet impossibly warm in its appearance. Firelight danced behind the windows, casting golden hues onto the snow-covered ground. I hesitated at the threshold. There were no signs of life, no footprints leading to or from the cabin, no smoke curling from the chimney. And yet, the light burned steadily, invitingly. The storm howled around me, urging me to step inside. I knocked, though I didn't expect an answer. My hand trembled, not just from the cold, but from something else, a strange sense of awe, as though I were standing before something sacred. When no response came, I gently pushed the door open. Warmth rushed out to meet me, a balm against the icy night. The cabin was small but welcoming, its walls lined with wood that gleamed in the firelight. A stone hearth dominated the room, the flames within crackling softly, their light casting long shadows. The air inside felt different, almost alive, heavy with stories I couldn't yet understand. It was as though the cabin itself had been waiting, not just for anyone, but for me. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the storm. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Little did I know, this cabin held more than warmth, it held memories, magic, and a truth I was only beginning to uncover. And so, my story began. Before we continue the story, let's pause for a moment. The night is long, the world is quiet, and this is your time to rest. Let's leave behind the worries of the day and settle into a place of calm. Wherever you are, allow yourself to get comfortable, whether lying down or sitting back, and let the stillness gently wrap around you. Take a deep breath in through your nose, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. Hold it for a moment, and then slowly exhale, letting go of any tension you might be holding. Let's do that again. Breathe in deeply, imagining the air bringing warmth and peace to every part of you. And as you exhale, imagine the worries, the noise, and the chaos of the outside world fading away. Picture yourself in a quiet forest, blanketed by snow. The world feels soft, hushed, as though the earth itself is holding its breath. The snow falls gently, each flake unique, drifting slowly to the ground. There's a beauty in its simplicity, in the way it softens everything it touches. Now, imagine standing at the edge of a clearing, a warm light glowing softly in the distance. It's steady and calm, like a beacon guiding you home. You take a step forward, feeling the crunch of snow beneath your feet. Each step is deliberate, grounding you in the present. The air is crisp, but it carries no bitterness. Instead, it feels refreshing, cleansing, as though with every breath, you're filling yourself with clarity and peace. You're in no rush, each step bringing you closer to that welcoming glow. As you approach, the light grows warmer, brighter. You can almost feel its gentle heat radiating toward you, inviting you to leave the cold behind. And now you're at the door of the cabin, its wooden frame strong yet unassuming. Take another deep breath and imagine stepping inside. The moment you cross the threshold, you're surrounded by warmth. The fire crackles softly, its golden light dancing on the walls. The air smells faintly of cedar and something sweet, like a memory you can't quite place. The room feels alive, not with movement, but with presence. It's as though the space itself is breathing, calm and steady, encouraging you to do the same. There's a chair by the fire, waiting for you. You settle into it, feeling the weight of the day lift from your shoulders. The flames mesmerize you, their gentle rhythm matching the beating of your heart. Outside, the snow falls silently, but in here, everything is still. The world feels far away, and all that matters is this moment, this quiet, soothing stillness. Allow yourself to linger here for a while. Let the warmth of the fire and the serenity of the cabin wrap around you, easing you into rest. There's no need to hurry. The story will wait for you. For now, simply be. The cabin's door creaked faintly as I pushed it open, the sound barely audible over the distant howling of the wind. Warmth greeted me immediately, brushing against my frozen skin like an old friend. I stepped inside hesitantly, unsure of what I would find. The air felt alive, almost heavy, as if it carried unseen stories within it. The scent of wood smoke and something faintly sweet, honey, perhaps, lingered, wrapping itself around me like a comforting blanket. The fire crackled in the hearth, its light casting flickering shadows across the small room. Yet, there were no signs of anyone else. The door shut behind me, sealing out the storm, and I felt the sharp contrast of silence. Inside, the world was still. Outside, it raged on. It was as though I had crossed into a different realm, one where time and the chaos of the storm no longer mattered. The cabin was modest, with a single room that held only the essentials. A sturdy wooden table stood near the fire, its surface worn and smooth, telling of years of use. A stack of firewood rested neatly in the corner, as if left for whoever might need it. A single chair faced the hearth, its carved back catching the golden light. And then I noticed the walls. They were covered in carvings, intricate, swirling patterns, and small scenes etched into the wood with remarkable detail. I stepped closer, running my fingers lightly over the surface. The carvings depicted people, travelers, perhaps, huddling by a fire, their faces etched with expressions of weariness, relief, and quiet gratitude. Some were alone, wrapped in cloaks or blankets. Others were in pairs or groups, sharing a meal, laughing, or simply sitting together in silence. Each figure seemed to tell its own story, as though the wood itself had captured their moments of refuge. Above the hearth, a larger carving caught my eye. It depicted the cabin itself, surrounded by swirling snow. A light glowed from its windows, just as it had when I first saw it. Beneath it, a line of words was carved in careful script: "To those who wander, find solace here." The message sent a shiver down my spine, not from fear, but from something deeper, an inexplicable connection to this place. It felt as though the cabin had been waiting for me, as though I belonged here in this moment. I turned to the table, noticing something I hadn't before: a small, leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age. Next to it lay a quill and an ink pot, both untouched yet ready to be used. I hesitated for a moment before reaching for the journal. Its pages were filled with handwriting, some neat and precise, others hurried and scrawled. I skimmed the entries, my breath catching as I realized these were the words of those who had come before me. This cabin wasn't just a shelter, it was a sanctuary. A place where stories, like mine, began to unfold. The fire crackled softly as I opened the journal, its pages fragile yet filled with words that seemed to hum with life. Each entry bore the voice of someone who had once found refuge here, their thoughts and emotions immortalized in ink. The first entry was written in a flowing script. The storm raged outside, but in here I found peace. To whoever finds this, know that this cabin is a gift, a safe harbor for the lost. May it guide you as it did me. The words resonated with me like an echo of my own thoughts. I turned the page to find more entries, each telling a story of someone who had passed through these walls. There were travelers caught in blizzards, hunters seeking warmth, and wanderers fleeing burdens they could no longer bear. One entry stood out. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. I was running, not from the storm, but from myself. I thought I would never find my way. But here, in this cabin, something changed. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel lighter now, as though I can face what's ahead. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. It was as if the cabin held a mirror to each soul that entered, reflecting back what they needed to see. The walls, too, seemed alive with these stories. As I looked around, the carvings took on new meaning. The figures I had noticed earlier, the weary travelers, the groups gathered around the fire, felt more vivid now. Each carving matched a story from the journal. I could see the frantic scribbler, hunched in the corner, their face carved with lines of worry and relief. Another figure, a hunter with a bow slung over their shoulder, sat by the fire, their expression serene. And then, something strange happened. The room seemed to shift, the air growing thicker. It was subtle at first, like the faint hum of wind, but soon I could hear it more clearly, whispers, soft and gentle, like the rustling of leaves. At first, I thought it was the storm outside. But as I focused, I realized the whispers were coming from the walls. The carvings, once still and silent, seemed almost alive now, their stories murmuring just beneath the surface. I leaned closer, running my fingers along the wood. The whispers grew louder, not in volume, but in clarity, as though the cabin was trying to speak to me. I couldn't make out distinct words, but the feeling was unmistakable: comfort, understanding, and an invitation to let go of my burdens. The firelight flickered, and for a moment I saw my own reflection in the polished wood of the table. A thought struck me, I wasn't just here to take shelter. I was here for something more. The cabin wasn't just a refuge, it was a witness, a keeper of stories. And now it had added mine to its collection. The whispers faded into a gentle hum, as though the cabin had shared all it wanted for now. I sat back, the journal still in my hands, my heart heavy with awe. The stories of the travelers echoed in my mind, weaving together into something larger, something I couldn't quite grasp yet. As I gazed at the carvings, they seemed to shift subtly in the firelight, their shapes almost imperceptibly alive. I blinked and leaned closer, my breath catching as I realized the flames weren't just casting shadows, they were moving. The figures carved into the walls were stirring, their still forms flickering as if animated by the fire's glow. One carving caught my eye. It was a figure standing alone, gazing out into the distance. There was something familiar about it, the posture, the tilt of the head. My chest tightened as the realization hit me. It was me. I stepped closer, my pulse quickening. The figure wasn't just similar, it was unmistakably me, down to the folds of my coat and the wear on my boots. How was this possible? I hadn't touched the walls, hadn't left a trace of my story here, and yet the cabin knew. I reached out, my fingers hovering just above the carving. The wood was warm, almost alive, and as I touched it, a sudden wave of emotion surged through me, grief, hope, relief, all at once. It wasn't just my story the cabin had captured. It was me. The whispers returned, clearer this time, weaving together into a melody that felt both foreign and familiar. I realized then that the cabin was more than a shelter, it was a keeper of something sacred. Each traveler who crossed its threshold left a piece of themselves behind, their essence etched into the walls, their stories held in the journal. I turned back to the hearth, where the flames danced steadily. Above it, the inscription I had seen earlier, "To those who wander, find solace here," now seemed to pulse with meaning. This wasn't just a cabin. It was a living entity, a guardian of the lost. The carvings began to glow faintly, as though the stories were coming alive. Each figure radiated a quiet strength, their tales intertwined in a tapestry of shared humanity. I could feel their emotions, fear, joy, loneliness, resilience, all blending into a sense of connection that transcended time. And then it hit me. This cabin didn't just offer warmth and shelter. It offered healing, a chance to confront the storms within as much as the ones outside. It didn't simply protect travelers from the world, it helped them find the strength to return to it. I stood in the center of the room, the warmth of the fire wrapping around me. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt seen, understood. The cabin had given me something I didn't even know I needed, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, I wasn't truly alone. The magic was real, and I was now part of it. The wind howled louder outside, rattling the windows as if demanding to be let in. I sat by the fire, the journal still resting in my lap, but my thoughts were no longer on the words within it. The carvings on the walls, the glow of the fire, the whispers in the air, they had stirred something deep inside me, something I couldn't ignore. For as long as I could remember, I had been running. From what, I wasn't sure. The pressures of daily life? The weight of expectations I could never seem to meet? Or perhaps it was something simpler, the fear of sitting still long enough to face myself. The storm outside was relentless, but as I sat there in the warmth of the cabin, I realized the storm within me had raged far longer. The cabin seemed to sense this, as if it could feel the unease I carried. The carvings on the walls glimmered faintly, their shapes shifting once again. I watched as one figure seemed to step forward from the wood, a lone traveler standing amidst a swirl of snow. Their head was bowed, their shoulders heavy with an invisible burden. It was me. The image was unmistakable, and yet, as I stared at it, something began to change. The figure straightened slightly, their head lifting to face the storm. The swirling snow around them softened, turning into delicate, glimmering flakes. The transformation was subtle, but it struck me like a bolt of lightning. The storm wasn't something to run from. It was something to face. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the fire grounding me. Memories began to surface, fragments of moments I had tried to bury. Arguments I'd walked away from instead of resolving. Opportunities I'd let slip by out of fear. Words I should have said but didn't. The cabin's whispers grew softer, as if urging me to listen, not to them, but to myself. I took a deep breath, letting the memories wash over me. It wasn't easy. Some of them stung like the cold outside, others left a dull ache in my chest. But as I sat there, I began to realize something important. The storm within me wasn't just made of pain. It also held strength. Every choice I'd made, every step I'd taken, even the wrong ones, had led me here, to this moment. The cabin wasn't a place to escape my struggles. It was a place to confront them, to find clarity in the chaos. I opened my eyes and looked at the carving of myself again. The figure was no longer alone. Behind it, Other figures began to appear, their shapes etched with quiet strength. The journal, the walls, the whispers, all of it had shown me that I wasn't the first to face a storm, and I wouldn't be the last. The storm within me still raged, but for the first time, I felt something else, calm at its center, like the eye of the storm. And in that stillness, I found the courage to keep going. The fire crackled softly, its light flickering over the journal as I turned another page. The entries blurred together, not because they were indistinct, but because they wove into a collective voice. Each one seemed to echo the others, like different notes in the same melody. These travelers, like me, had been drawn to the cabin, not just for shelter, but for something deeper. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the carvings on the walls. Each figure now seemed to pulse with life, their stories whispering in harmony. It wasn't just the storm outside that had led them here. It was the storms they carried within, griefs unspoken, dreams abandoned, fears unresolved. But there was more to it than that. The cabin didn't merely offer an escape. It offered a chance to pause, to breathe, to reflect. And when the travelers left, they left lighter, their burdens eased, their paths clearer. It dawned on me that this wasn't just happenstance. The cabin had a purpose, a magic of its own, tied to the solace it offered. I traced my fingers over the carvings, pausing on the one of the lone traveler, the one that had looked so much like me. It wasn't alone anymore. Other figures now surrounded it, forming a circle, their presence quiet but steady. It was a reflection of what I was beginning to understand. This cabin connected everyone who had ever crossed its threshold. Flipping through the journal again, I began to see patterns in the words. One entry described how the fire seemed to burn brighter when the traveler finally allowed themselves to cry. Another spoke of dreams, once forgotten and rediscovered while sitting in the chair by the hearth. And then, an older entry caught my eye. The handwriting was faded, the ink smudged, but its meaning was clear. The cabin found me when I was lost. It gave me what I needed, space to grieve, to hope, to begin again. I leave this for the next wanderer. Know that you are not alone. We are all part of something larger. I closed the journal, feeling a lump rise in my throat. This wasn't just a cabin, it was a keeper of stories, a guardian of weary souls. The carvings, the whispers, the journal, they were all pieces of a tradition, one that spanned generations. Each traveler had added their story, their presence, to this place, and in doing so, they'd become part of its magic. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, but I no longer felt its weight. The cabin had revealed its purpose to me, and I knew now that I was part of something bigger. When I left, I would carry this moment with me, just as others had before me. And maybe, just maybe, I would leave behind a piece of my own story, one that might help the next traveler who found themselves lost in the snow. The cabin wasn't just a refuge. It was a legacy, alive with the echoes of those who had found solace within its walls. And now I was part of it, too. The storm began to ease, its ferocity softening into a quiet snowfall. The howling wind that had once rattled the cabin now sounded distant, like a fading memory. I stood by the window, watching as snowflakes swirled gently in the dim light of the fire. The world outside seemed calmer, transformed, as if the storm had done its work and now rested. I turned back to the room, taking in the carvings on the walls, the journal on the table, the warmth of the fire. This place had been more than a shelter, it had been a mirror, a guide, and a companion. Its magic wasn't loud or imposing, it was quiet, patient, and deeply profound. I knew it was time to leave. The storm had kept me here, but the cabin had prepared me to step back into the world. I reached for the journal one last time, flipping to a blank page. The ink and quill were waiting, as they had been for all who came before me. Sitting at the table, I hesitated, unsure of how to put my experience into words. The firelight flickered, as if encouraging me, and I began to write. The storm brought me here, but this cabin gave me more than shelter. It gave me time to reflect, to listen, and to face what I had been running from. To whoever reads this, know that you are not alone. This place holds us all, our fears, our hopes, our dreams. Let it guide you as it guided me. I paused, the quill hovering over the page. After a moment, I added, "And when you are ready, leave your story here. Someone will need it, just as I needed those who came before me." I set the journal back on the table, feeling a sense of closure. My part in the cabin's story was complete, but its magic would live on, carried by the travelers yet to come. I gathered my coat and stepped to the door, pausing for a moment to take one last look around. The carvings glowed softly in the firelight, their stories now as familiar to me as my own. I whispered a quiet thank you, unsure if the cabin could hear, but feeling its presence nonetheless. The cold hit me as I opened the door, but it no longer felt harsh. It was crisp and clean, the kind of cold that wakes you up rather than weighs you down. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped outside, the glow of the cabin fading as I walked into the night. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lost. The storm within me had quieted, its chaos replaced with clarity. And though I walked alone, I carried with me the knowledge that I was part of something greater, a tradition of solace and strength, born from a cabin in the woods. As I disappeared into the snowy night, I knew the cabin would still be there, waiting for the next wanderer, ready to offer its light.